Greetings, everyone. My name is Bridget Cabrera, she, her, hers, and I'm the Executive Director of Methodist Federation for Social Action. MFSA has been around for over 100 years, and we are a justice-seeking, faith-based policy and organizing network whose mission is to mobilize, lead, and sustain a progressive United Methodist movement. Hold on one second. I think we've got someone who is sharing that shouldn't be sharing their screen. So we will stop that real quick. All right, we're back. So yes, MFSA has been around for over 100 years. We're a faith-based policy and organizing network, and our mission is to mobilize, lead, and sustain a progressive United Methodist movement, engage in energizing people to be agents of God's justice, peace, and reconciliation. And we are so excited to continue to be co-hosting this series of webinars with our really great partner, United Methodists for Kairos Response, UMKR. As we begin our conversation today, we want to acknowledge the many lands that we are joining this call on, their histories, all the being seen and unseen, known and unknown as we step into our work on the various lands that we are joining this call from, most of us as uninvited guests. And we offer this work in the spirit of reparation, devoting ourselves to justice as we strive to uplift the legacy of these many lands. We ask that if you would like to acknowledge the land of where you are currently, please place the name in the comments. A few announcements concerning our call together today. By participating in our webinars, we covenant together to co-create an equitable and brave space where we learn, engage, and grow in relationship together. We are recording this webinar, and that recording will be shared in the coming days. It'll be on both of our YouTube channels and will be sent out by email. So you'll can find those in those ways and on our websites. If you have questions, be sure to type them in the chat box, and we will also have time for questions later on in the call, after the call. And we do have closed captioning available. It is automatically generated, so bear with any spelling or errors that will probably happen in there, but we do have that available. And now we'll be turning this over to our moderator, Lisa.
Hi, friends. It's great to see you all, and thanks to Bridget and MFSA for co-sponsoring and assisting with our webinars. United Methodist Kairos Response, UMKR, is a movement in the United Methodist Church for Palestinian human rights. Our goal is freedom, justice, and equality for all Palestinians and Israelis. UMKR was started 12 years ago to help our denomination follow through on its commitment to human rights in the Holy Land by boycotting and divesting from companies and entities that support the occupation of Palestine. Our work also includes education, promotion of authentic Holy Land travel, and political actions to change government policy. As Christians, we in UMKR believe that God has called us to this justice-seeking and peacemaking work. In November, 3 United Methodist women leaders traveled at UMKR's request to Bethlehem to attend the 13th International Conference of Kairos Palestine. The Kairos Palestine movement is an ecumenical, nonviolent movement led by Palestinian Christians, which asserts that now is the Kairos, the appointed moment, where Christians are called to labor for justice, hope, and love to end suffering in the Holy Land. UMKR was named for Kairos Palestine, and it is their guidance that we strive to follow. Kairos Palestine issued their Kairos Palestine document in 2009, in which they called out to the Big C Church, meaning all of us around the world, to support them. They asked us to pray and to act on their behalf, doing exactly the kinds of things that UMKR does: boycott and divest, educate and advocate. In 2020, they issued another document called A Cry for Hope, And in 2022, they assembled a dossier on apartheid, and we'll be posting links to these documents in the chat. So their annual conferences are held so that advocates for Palestine can strategize together. These are committed leaders from around the world who work together in a group called Global Kairos for Justice. UMKR is usually present at these meetings, and this year 3 influential women attended, and they will be our speakers today. In addition to attending the meetings, they spent a few days traveling in the region, meeting with United Methodist supported advanced projects. I'm very excited to hear from them. And let me introduce our first speaker, who is J. Paula Roderick. She's an employment discrimination and civil rights attorney practicing in the Chicago area. Paula is a steering committee member in United Methodist for Kairos Response and a justice leader in the Northern Illinois Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. And she's a member of Broadway UMC in Chicago. She also serves on the board of Eyewitness Palestine and has made multiple visits to Palestine. Paul is a tireless advocate and organizer with numerous social justice organizations tackling issues related to human rights, policing, Black youth, and Palestinian liberation, including groups like Blacks for Palestine, Chicago Faith Coalition on Middle East Policy, and Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, among others. So Paula.
All right, thank you, Lisa. I'm Paula Roderick. I am sitting on unceded Potawatomi land, and I went on my first interfaith delegation in 2008, and I have the honor of talking about the Kairos Palestine conference itself. The people, the church, and resisting occupation. It was held in Bethlehem, Shepherd's Field. Next slide. The 13th anniversary was an invitation to hear directly from Palestinians inside West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, inside 48, and allies from the global Kairos community, and also some secular human rights organizations. It was my first opportunity to hear Kairos Palestine there, and it was also the first conference where secular groups were invited to speak as well. Next slide shows this is where we were introduced, and the next one is beyond the 12 amazing speakers. We also were welcomed by the Young Scouts in a call from the Latin Patriarch Emeritus, Michael Saba, who said, Israel does not want to end the occupation. Instead, they deny the occupation and claim the entitled land belongs to them, and our duty is to resist with hope, with love, but still to understand the immediacy of fighting the occupation. And with that call, all of the speakers, I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, all of the speakers had 3 messages. One, it's crucial to understand apartheid and racism in the Palestinian context. And 2, the critical importance of witnessing to the occupation. And 3, the urgency of now. The time for the global Christian community to act is now, because the conditions have deteriorated so far and so fast. Many of the guests were familiar with the term apartheid, but what the speakers wanted us to hear is what does that look like and feel like on the ground, living under occupation, witnessing to the escalation in home demolitions, threatened destruction of whole communities in East Jerusalem, Masafa Yada, being overly surveilled in their homes and communities, the restrictions on movements, checkpoint after checkpoint, a convoluted permit system, the effect of arrests and imprisonment on children and adults in whole communities, and especially the use of administrative detention. The overwhelming presence of illegal settlements and the overwhelming presence of settlers, all of which speak to why many organizations have called this racist and apartheid. The second issue that we heard about was the importance of come and see and go and tell, taking ethical tourism. The guests were treated with the attendance, the chance to attend the ATG 25th anniversary conference, in which many speakers talk about what does it mean to have taken ethical tour? What does it mean to meet with the living stones? The third issue we heard about was how will we as people of faith respond? What is the urgency of now? How are we going to respond? And Reverend Solomon from the ELC South Africa eloquently stated, it was encouraging to have the World Council of Churches issue their statement from this summer, encouraging WCC members to study and respond to the critical recent reports on apartheid. You'll find links to that on the UMKR website. But as he urged, we need to push our church organizations and leaders to do more than issue statements. We must find concrete ways to support the Palestinian fight for freedom. He ended his talk with a chant for Amandla. And in a call recently, Reverend Solomon reminded me when they started that chant in South Africa, they were not winning the fight for justice. And just as we chanted Amandla in this conference, we know Palestinians have not yet won their fight for justice. The speakers went on, next slide, to ask us to continue to understand and ask about the critical need to open up leadership and to include women and youth, giving them roles with true leadership positions and recognizing their pain, and also contributions to the battle for justice, to include non-sectarian groups and NGOs in our work, to demand more of our churches, to consider, are we letting our Palestinian brothers and sisters down by taking Holy Land trips where we don't meet with the living stones and we don't see the occupation? And do we leave Gaza out of the conversation as if Gaza and the plight of the over 2 million Palestinians trapped behind the Israeli walls can be ignored and forgotten? And also, we have to use the words apartheid and racism. Words matter, and the words convey the true reality of the situation and the urgency of the brutality of this occupation. I think in the chat, you will also see there's a link to Kairos Palestine's final statement after this conference. Please take a look at it. There's much more information there. The final note, Lisa asked if I would reflect a little bit on the atmosphere at the conference. Next slide. These are some speakers. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. All of those slides show people that I was so proud to meet. It was like coming home. I knew and respected these people from articles, books, and webinars, and I had a chance to meet them on their home turf. Sahar Francis. In this picture, there's also Reverend Angelina Kaiser from the MLO. In one of the pictures that you saw, Osama from WIAM. We saw pictures, Munther and Rafat, who helped draft the Kairos Palestine. We had the opportunity to meet them on their home turf and also to witness the Palestinian resilience, the Samud, and the incredible Palestinian hospitality. I can't say too much about that. So in conclusion, I'm going to pass this on to Lisa, who's going to introduce Holly Metcalf, who's going to talk about our tour. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Paula, for sharing about the conference. Our next speaker is Holly Metcalf. She's the Peace with Justice Director at the United Methodist Church's General Board of Church and Society. She has responsibility for advocacy efforts on peace building, conflict resolution, disarmament and non-proliferation, and gun violence prevention. Before joining the GBCS staff, Holly was a Foreign Service officer with the U.S. State Department, working on human rights, religious freedom, and refugee issues. Previously, she served as a Peace Corps volunteer and a high school teacher. Holly is currently completing her Master of Divinity at Wesley Theological Seminary and is a candidate for ordination in the Baltimore, Washington Annual Conference, where she is a member at Mount Vernon Place United Methodist Church. Thanks, Holly, for being with us today.
Thank you, Lisa. So this was my first trip to Israel, Palestine. And so I want to share a little bit with you guys about my impressions as a first-time visitor there, and specifically about two separate visits that we had when we were there. First, I want to share with you about a trip we took to Ramallah to meet with 4 different organizations, and we could put up a slide with a photo at this point. So we traveled to Ramallah and we met with Adamir, Bisan, Defense for Children International Palestine, and the Union of Agricultural Work Committees. And these are 4 of the civil society organizations that Israel designated as terrorist organizations in October 2021. These are groups that work on human rights, they work on advocacy for prisoners, and Israel at that time said they had secret or classified information that proved these were in fact terrorist organizations. The countries with which Israel has shared that information have not agreed with that assessment. And so these are longtime partners and folks that are known to the United Methodist Church, and we felt it was important to travel there and hear directly from them what was going on with their organizations. So they talked to us about several different things, but what I thought was really interesting was the way they talked about what they called the shrinking space for civil society in Palestine. So both in this meeting and also at the conference, they talked about the pressures that were being placed on these civil society human rights organizations. And they kind of broke it down in 2 different ways. First, they talked about the obvious surface level effects, right? So these organizations were designated as organizations that support terrorism, and that had some immediate obvious implications. Some people from the organizations were placed in administrative detention. Some of their staff quit due to the pressure. Some of their equipment was seized, private files from the lawyers that included private case documents and attorney-client information. And some of them have lost funding due to international banks refusing to process transactions because of concerns about these allegations. But what was really interesting to me was the way they talked about the more subtle, but even more dangerous effects of just the threat and uncertainty. So they talked about uncertainty as a form of control in their lives. They talked about being under pressure to play it safe. Some of the things they shared with us was that they felt like they never knew if their office was going to be raided or if their files were going to be taken. They never knew if their international visas were going to be taken. One of them had only just found out upon arriving at the airport for an international trip that her visa had been canceled. They never know if their travel permit to Jerusalem is going to be canceled, which could prevent them from going to work, from getting medical care, from seeking education. I mentioned already that the international banks can freeze their accounts and refuse to transfer money. They also talked a bit about how Israel's claim that they have secret information or classified information prevents them from being able to mount a defense. You can't defend yourself against claims that are never disclosed. And so they felt that that was really unfair. They also talked about constant surveillance, both electronic surveillance through electronic devices, but also through just the constant security presence of Israeli security throughout the West Bank. In particular, Defense for Children International Palestine, who works with minors that have been placed in administrative detention or in prison, they were talking about how these allegations have distracted them from their work supporting children because now they're having to put effort into defending themselves against these allegations and into hiring external audit firms, et cetera, to prove that the allegations aren't true. So they asked for some specific things from us, and I want to share those with you guys today. One of the things they asked for was continued support for the international community. They really emphasized how important it is to continue to have international partnerships, to continue to have folks come visit them in their offices, to continue to receive financial support. They also asked us to advocate on their behalf in various political arenas. They asked that we call for our governments and multilateral institutions to push Israel to provide the justifications or the evidence that they say they have against these civil society organizations. They asked that we continue to talk about their case when we speak to our congresspeople and other elected officials. They also talked about this term apartheid, and they felt that it was really important. They asked us to use the term apartheid, and they said that it was important for particular reasons. they wanted to emphasize the fact that the restrictions that were placed on them by Israeli entities, Israeli authorities. And they felt like by using the term apartheid, it emphasizes the fact that Israel is in control of this whole area. And so they felt that if we don't use the term apartheid, it allows for this dual system where it seems like there is a democratic state of Israel and then another state of Palestine where different rules apply. And what they were asking was that the international community, and particularly the international Christian community, embrace this term apartheid to reinforce and to highlight the fact that it is in fact an area controlled by Israeli forces in which the rules are different depending on if you are Israeli or you are Palestinian. I also want to talk to you about a visit we took to the village of Wadi Fakin, and I have a photo of us here. So Wadi Fakin is a village near Bethlehem, and they've been facing difficulties from the expansion of an Israeli settlement. You can see it there on the hill. It's called Beitar Elite. And this is just one example of a Palestinian village that's facing threats from settlement expansion. But this is a particular village that has a strong connection with the United Methodist Church. There's a group called Friends of Wadi Fakin that's a US-based organization that was founded by United Methodist lay leaders and clergy. And they have developed a close relationship with this village. They advocate on their behalf, and they have helped with various projects through UMKR advance funds in Wadi Fakin. So what's happening in this village that we got to hear about from the families there is that the settlement above is continuing to expand and expand and expand. And in doing so, it's consuming more and more of the village's land. Since 1948, at least 3/4 of the village's land has been taken by the Israeli government, and parts of that have been given for this settlement. They also shared with us that it's more than just land, that before the settlement was built there were 11 springs that they used to water their crops in the fields there. And now now 6 of them have dried out, and the ones that remain are very weak, and they don't have the same water supply they used to have. They also talked to us about construction debris and raw sewage coming down that hill, because the settlement is up on the hill, up above the village, and there's runoff and things that come down that hill into their agricultural fields. One of the other issues they told us about was the difficulty getting construction or renovation permits. One specific example they gave us was a high school, just a school that's located just to the left of where that photo was taken. And they wanted to do renovations on the school to upgrade it and to also make sure that it's stable, because oftentimes with the construction on the hill, they're doing blasting and they want to make sure that there's no safety concerns with the school, but they've been unable to get permits to do that construction work. And they talk about how unfair it is to watch continued construction up on the hill for the Israeli settlement when they can't get a permit to renovate this school. So I also have another photo. I wanted to show that this is ongoing. So since we left, we were there in November, and this photo was taken in late December. You're looking at 2 different farmers' fields in the village of Wadi Fakin, and you're looking at the destruction of some of their trees and some of their farmland that happened even after we left. This is not on the same side of the village as the settlement. This is actually on the other side, but I wanted to include this just to show that they're facing pressure from many different directions, and that they continue to have their land seized as we speak. So they also asked us for some specific things while we were there. And I want to highlight the fact that everything that they asked us for in Wadi Fakin is also part of our United Methodist resolutions. In the United Methodist Book of Resolution number 6111, we list each of these specific things. One of the things they asked us to do is to pressure Israel for an end to settlement construction and for international accountability when the settlements are expanded. These settlements are illegal under international law. Israel has signed various accords saying that they won't build these settlements, and yet the construction continues. And so they were asking us to hold Israel accountable through international pressure for doing that. They also pointed out that a lot of these settlements are constructed through funding that is collected in the United States. Faith-based organizations that receive 501c3 status are contributing to the construction of these settlements. And so they asked us specifically in America to pressure the Treasury Department to revoke tax status for those organizations. And then the third thing they asked us for was international pressure so that Israel feels required to identify and investigate settler violence. They felt like when these settlements, when there was incidences of violence from Israeli settlers against Palestinians, that Israel did not feel compelled to investigate or to hold those people accountable. And so they asked us to increase international pressure in that area. And Lisa, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Holly. It was great to hear what these organizations that you visited are asking us to do, because our work is very important. I'd now like to introduce our third speaker. Reverend Alka Lal is a member of the Board of Directors of the United Methodist Church's General Commission on Religion and Race. And she's an ordained elder in the Northern Illinois Conference, where she's served since 2000, currently at Broadway United Methodist Church in Chicago. She's been twice elected as a Northern Illinois delegate to General Conference and jurisdictional conferences, and is the first elected clergy to the postponed 2024 General Conference. She was also a delegate to the World Methodist Council as a youth representative from India in 1986. Alka has chaired the Northern Illinois Conference Annual Conference Committee and served on the board of directors of that conference's Justice for Our Neighbors group and on the board of the Reconciling Ministries Network. We look forward to hearing more about some of their visits from Alka.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Holly and Paula. It was indeed a meaningful experience to travel with you. When we came back and people asked, so how was it? It's just hard to say. It was good. And I started saying it was good in a bad way. And then I started to say it was a meaningful experience. I think Teresa may have said that to me when I said it was good in a bad way. Or it was a meaningful experience. But it was an honor to travel with Holly and Paula. It was my third visit to Palestine, and the experience was as painful, if not more, as the first time. But the suffering of the people that we met and the suffering that we saw of the country as a whole is definitely way more when I first visited. So besides the places that Holly talked about, we also visited a few other places, communities, camps, refugee camps, and some agencies that are doing wonderful work with young people and older people in Palestine. So a refugee camp that we visited was the Ida refugee camp. It was established in 1950. Today, it looks more like a city than a refugee camp, because people have been living there for so long that instead of having just tents, they have built homes and have tried to make life in this camp as normal as possible, because otherwise these people live with minimal resources and really difficult to live conditions. Like even water and electricity is uncertain for them. For this camp specifically, we learned that they may get like an hour or two of water supply in a week. And that too is random. There's no set pattern on when they will get water. And so almost all homes have big reservoirs on their rooftops to collect water whenever water is supplied. The whole camp has one school and no health care center. While we were there, I suddenly started hearing what did not sound like a plane, in the sky. And so our guide looked at me and saw my confusion and said, yes, it's not a plane. You're not hearing a plane. It is a fighter plane that is hovering around over us, which is normal for them. And they also then told us that that camp is most exposed to tear gas. In the camp is an agency called Al Rawd. It is an independent community-based center established to promote a sort of normal childhood for the younger generations and to empower them to learn behaviors and develop skills to live nonviolent lives through art, through theater, and they also provide vocational training for the children and the young adults in the community or in the camp. The word Al Rawd actually means pioneer in Arabic. So they have pioneered this program and are doing all they can to give not only some normalcy to the youth and young adults in their camp, but also give them tools to live life in nonviolent ways. We also had the opportunity to travel into Hebron and to visit the Ibrahimi Mosque. For tourists, also, it is one of the attractions. It's called the Cape of Maqtala for the Jews, and it's the Ibrahimi Mosque for the Muslims. So it has religious significance for two major group of people. But the building itself was divided in the late 60s. So each group has only access to a part of it. And I showed you this entrance because this is the entrance, and this is the final entrance to go into the mosque. But before that, you have several turnstiles like this that you have to go through. And then you have to go through questioning, and you have to show your documents. As we were trying to enter, there was a family who was not let in. There was a family, one of the members was allowed to go in and the older person had to turn around, and all they did was come back and then come to the turnstile again and then show their papers, but just showing how they have made life difficult for people who try to access these communities. Palestinian community of Hebron around the mosque has also suffered many changes. Today, most of the shops remain closed around the mosque. Young people sell their goods on the streets. And this net that you see on top of the street is just to protect the shopkeepers from all the debris and stuff that is constantly thrown on them. When we were visiting that day, they were talking about water. It was just, if they cannot throw anything else, they just throw water just to make life difficult, just to create problems for them. We met a women's organization while we were in Hebron, and we met a young person named Gandhi, who actually sold bracelets to us, but he took us to his home. He took us to a part of the street where the street was just blocked. They had put boulders on the street and blocked access to part of his home. And so things like this just happen to them all the time. They try to make the best that they can with what they have. We also were able to visit Hope Secondary School, which was started by a Mennonite group provide education to the orphaned and the underprivileged young Palestinians. It is a Christian institution. This year, they have also started a new class for kids with special needs and a rehab center. And today, almost 90%, Mennonites are not managing this school anymore, but 90% of the support today comes from the United Methodist Church and from the United States in general for this school. Walled Off Hotel is an establishment that was that began in 2017 as an exhibition of a London-based artist named Banksy. But now it has turned into a beautiful hotel, and the hotel is filled with art by Banksy and other artists. They also have a museum where you can take pictures, but there is an exhibition, art exhibition, where you can take pictures and make purchases and stuff. But the hotel is located just about 500 meters from the wall. And the wall inside the hotel and outside. So this picture is just across the street from the walled off hotel. The art that you see on the wall speaks of the pain, the suffering, and the resilience of the Palestinian people. We wish we could show you all of the pictures that we took from this wall. This is not an actual whole. This is art to show what is on the other side and how their lives is on this side of the wall. Another agency that we were able to visit is the WIAM Center, which was started in 1994 and is a conflict transformation center. It works on the ground among Palestinian folk, addressing the consequences of long-term conflicts and empowering all people, but especially youth and young adults, to teach them to resolve disputes through mediation. The word that they use is sulha. Sulha means mediation, or sulha means compromise, actually. And so some of their catch slogans are no more blame, no more victim. Taking a holistic approach as they facilitate reconciliation between the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. The next picture that I have is to just show you how close this center is to the wall and to the gate. So the right above Osama's head, you see that little round, that is the center where the police is, and right under that is a gate that opens. And so constantly they experience the stress of being so close to the wall. We also were able to visit a farm that is on a hilltop. It's been yeah, you were correct, Bridget. It's good. Yeah, it's called the Tent of Nations now. It is a farm on a hilltop. It has been in Dawood Nassar's. Dawood is the person who we are talking to in this purple sweatshirt. It's been in his family for generations, but it is on a hilltop and it is surrounded by settlements. And so Nasser or Dawood constantly is visited by police and settlers, making life difficult for them. They also make access to this farm difficult. So Dawood has taken it upon himself to make this farm self-sustaining. They have named it the Tent of Nations now, and volunteers are invited and welcomed from all around the world to help in this project by supporting the farm financially and also by volunteering. You can go and volunteer there for as long as you can afford to go. Dawood is doing everything. He's generating his own energy. He is growing everything he can to make sure that if at any point access is denied to the camp, that they will be able to survive on their own. They would have everything that they need on their own. Today, it is surrounded, as I said, with settlements all around. And we do have a video that we want to show you to see how they constantly, the family makes a way and the settlers or the police come and block access. So constantly they keep blocking access for them. We will show you the main access that was to the farm that was blocked. So Bridget, if we could show the video just for, it's a very short video.
So these are the rocks that they have put in the way to access where the Tent of Nations. So cars can't go that far. They have to walk. And then here is a gate that they have put, because that helps them to just remove the gate and have access whenever they want. Those soldiers.
So all the agencies that we visited are doing grassroots work to educate and empower their youth and their young adults to resist violence and to fight for their rights in a peaceful way. But the pain and the struggles that we witnessed is beyond words. And the pictures that we're showing you do no justice to the reality on ground. The surveillance that Holly talked about is experienced by all of these agencies all the time also. Everybody just kept reminding us that the settlements and all that the Palestinian people are suffering from the Israeli soldiers is a violation of international law, but that there is not the same kind of response, that they're not receiving the response that they should receive, that they are not, that the Israelis are not being held accountable in the way that they should be held accountable. The biggest concern they talked about this time was of this attention, the lack of attention from the international community. And this time they were also able to compare it with the response, the international response that Ukraine and Russia have received. And so that was painful to hear. And we really there was nothing we could say. While they were talking about how we as people from the United States are involved in the suffering that Palestinian people experienced, their hospitality to us was unbelievable. We wish we could show you all the pictures of the people we visited, even the shopkeepers. The first thing before they show you anything, their question is if we want tea or coffee. And there was no place where we could go without receiving coffee. Gifts from shopkeepers. We're trying to buy their things, and they're also giving us gifts as they're packing stuff for us. Come and see, go and tell. Are there other slogans? Please come, please see the way we live. And then please go and tell the truth, tell the reality, which is very different from what the media shows. They also requested that we think different ways of tourism, that we come not just as pilgrims or as tourists, but that we experience pilgrimage in the Palestinian land too, with the Palestinian people. So with those words, I will give it back to Lisa.
Thanks so much, Alka. We appreciate hearing from all of the speakers today. We thought we might have a time now for the 4 of us to have a little bit of a conversation for you to eavesdrop onto, and save your questions for after the top of the hour, when we'll have a less formal time for actual Q&A. But I'm going to ask the 3 of them a couple of questions right now. So it looks like we still need to get Holly, there she is. Okay, great. So we wanted to know what touched your heart the most, and maybe also what was most troubling. So somebody want to start, Paula?
I'm going to give a statement from Dawood Nasser, because one of the things that touched my heart, I mean, Alka said it, like the resilience, the similitude, but also the hospitality. When we met with Dawood, it was after his court hearing. He had expected it was going to be the end of the case because it had been continued and continued and continued. And instead, they continued it one more time. And the next hearing is on January 16th. But in that picture, there he was. He had the internationals, the guys that you could see in the back. They had come to the conference, but then they were there at the Tent of Nations to help out. And this is the message Dawood said he wanted us to convey today. We're in need of prayer. Our next court session is January 16th, and the expectation is, since there's been no objection to re-registering the land, that it will be granted. But of course, the case may be continued or other outcome. Still, we're hopeful this will end our 32 years with the legal authorities. And he's going to follow up with UMKR about what happens after January 16th. But it is his faithfulness, I think, that just, that's what he's had to say, is pray for us, and we believe in hope. Yeah.
Thanks. Holly?
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, I used to teach high school, and I think what touched my heart the most was the young folks there and the organizations that were working with young folks. So Defense for Children International Palestine was talking about some of the work that they do when teenagers are released from detention. And oftentimes these are teenagers that were never charged and were placed in administrative detention for a period of time. How difficult it is to get them reintegrated into high school after having been in prison. And I think anyone who's ever worked with teenagers can understand how challenging that must be in any situation. And I was really touched by the difficult work they were doing walking alongside those kids. Also, WIAM's work on conflict resolution with high school kids, which is a skill that is so challenging for all of us at all ages, and particularly for kids living in a really tough situation and being teenagers. So I was really impressed with that. And then I think the most troubling part for me that it is impossible to explain unless you go see it is the power discrepancy. It's the power discrepancy between the Israeli forces on the ground and the Palestinian villages just trying to live their day-to-day life.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, for me also, it's the resiliency of the people. I mean, for so long, they have been living as refugees on their own land. But the resiliency that we saw, the determination to live that we saw, one of the pictures that we took that we've not been able to show you is it says existence is resistance. You know, for them, just to be able to survive is an act of resistance for them. The hospitality, we cannot talk enough about that. Any shop that we went to, any of these agencies that we visited, their hospitality was amazing. A simple thing, in our hotel, you know, we did have a bathtub. And so I had this grand desire to take a bath, but we were so busy that I never was able to take a bath. And I'm grateful towards the end, but it's just little things. No, we have access to water all the time. So bath was a normal thing for me to think of. Oh, there's a tub, I should take a bath. I wish to take a bath. I'm glad I couldn't. I'm glad we were so busy, because one of these days, I think it was the day we were visiting Aida camp, it suddenly clicked to, you know, when our guide talked about they getting water just for 1 or 2 hours in a whole week, and that they have to buy water. Then it suddenly hit me that the hotel is buying water that I would have wasted. But they have that provision, they have it available to us. That's just the level of hospitality and their willingness to survive. We did not find beggars there. Even the kids are not, the kids run to us asking for $1, but in the second breath, you see an adult saying, no, don't go away. They can sell things and make money that way. So yeah, the love, the hope that they live with, and the resilience that they have is amazing.
Wow, thank you. I think those of us
And it both touched my heart and broke my heart.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to add to what Elka was saying, because when we talked about WIA, what you didn't see is there is a playground under that guard station. These children are trying to play, and they use skunk water. So periodically, this is what happens with children. And I guess the other thing, because Gaza is always on my heart. It's amazing that we heard from a woman in a conference, right? She was in Gaza. And then afterwards, we did a Zoom hearing with Dr. Waji Abu Zarifa from Gaza. They are an hour away, but cannot get out to come to important meetings. Maybe not even an hour away, but they're trapped. It just is amazing. Yeah.
So I wondered, as women, we're all women here today on the screen, and as women of faith, did you think your role was different, or did you see things that others might not have seen? Anyone want to jump in with a thought about that?
I will say, okay, so my hero is Sahar Francis as an attorney, but she's an attorney and a woman, and she gets credit, but the work that she does is amazing. And we met with Layla in Hebron, women in Hebron, the work that she's done, and yet they have this attitude of welcoming and being warm and loving, and I'm not sure that we give them that credit that they deserve.
That's good, Paula. Yes, that's sort of my feel would be too, that the women and the young adults are doing a lot of good work. They may or may not be getting the same kind of attention or acknowledgement from organizations. There's still a patriarchal society, and so they're doing a lot of work. And we are hoping that over the years, even within the Kairos movement, that we will start to see more women and more young adults taking leadership.
Cool. So we wanted to spend a few minutes talking about action steps. What can we do? You heard some suggestions already, but I think that each of us has something specific we want to target. Paula, do you want to start? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Ethical tourism. I mean, come and see. We didn't talk about the tour guides and the tours that we went on, but we went with a tour guide from ATG. We went with a tour guide from Grace Tourism, so that they benefit from the tours, but they also share from their heart. And when you see it, you come back with an experience and you want to do something. And I did see in the chat, there's a comment from someone about using the term resilience. After we get done, I would love to address that. So if you want to stick on, I want to talk about resilience. Yeah.
All right, Holly.
Yeah, I want to echo what Paula said about come and see, go and tell. Absolutely go visit. We should mention, if we haven't already, that the city of Bethlehem, if you go on a Holy Land visit, the city of Bethlehem is in Palestine. It's in the West Bank. So make sure when you go there to see other parts of the West Bank, to talk to Palestinians when you're there. If that's not a possibility for you right away, I would suggest forming a small group at your church to study some of these documents that we've been dropping in the chat. Read scripture together, pray together, take a look at these documents and see where you are led after you've taken a look at the issue. And if you need extra resources or anything, feel free to contact any of us on the screen and we can try to provide those.
Great. And Alka, I know you were there, represented the General Commission on Religion and Race, and talking about race and racism, and wondered if there are resources that we can use that you all might have.
There are definitely resources that in a few minutes I will be happy to drop in the chat. But also resilience, I do want to acknowledge that I am using the word resilience as their strength, not as a way for us to feel like, okay, so we can pull back and we don't have to do anything. Resilience as in their willingness to survive with what they have, but it should not take away from us to do all we can to bring justice to these people who live with apartheid or in apartheid situation.
Mm-hmm. Good. And I wanted to add that if those on the call today are United Methodist, we would love for you to talk to your general conference to talk to them and to share with them your experience related to Israel Palestine, and to encourage them to promote for the resolutions that we have submitted to General Conference. They were sent in for the conference in 2020, which has been postponed now a couple times until 2024. So there we're trying to get the renewal of that resolution 6111 that Holly met. Two, asking the United Methodist Church not to hold Israeli bonds, and one, to support other support the UN resolutions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So those 2024, and in the meantime, if your annual conference, if you are involved as a United Methodist and you would like to submit a resolution for your annual conference coming up this spring or summer, get in touch with us and we can get to you some of the templates that we've designed. One is to read the Cry of Hope. How simple is that?
Yeah.
One is addressing Israeli detention of children, another on opposing the anti-boycott laws, one on opposing Christian Zionism. And for those that have a very progressive conference, you might want to identify and oppose apartheid in the Holy Land. So those are some things we can suggest. So at this point, we are at the top of the hour, and our plan was to stop the recording. Let me throw it back to Bridget first, and then we'll stop the recording and come back for a more informal time of Q&A.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be making public the recording of this call today, so that'll be posted on both MFSA and UMKR's websites, on our YouTube channels. You'll probably be sent that in our newsletter, so be on the lookout for that. It should be probably posted to the YouTube channels probably by the beginning of next week, so be sure to check it out and share this widely. And join us for our next webinar, which will be in March. You'll get some more information about when that will be and the topic of that discussion. So thanks again, and I hope you will join us in March.